This fucking slut fucked a minor fry. I guess I should have seen it coming. Looking back now, there were signs, but at the time, I was too caught up in my routine to notice. My wife, Emily, and I had been married for 9 years. We weren't perfect, but who is? We had a cozy home, 2 adorable kids, and enough inside jokes to make us feel like we'd cracked the code of happy marriages. Or so I thought. Things started changing a few months ago. Emily suddenly became a whole new version of herself, a more polished one. She bought fancy clothes, spent hours perfecting her makeup, and swapped our Netflix marathons for yoga and self-care weekends. I was proud of her at first, thought she was taking care of herself, finding her confidence. But then came the late nights. She had this new book club that met every Thursday. Emily had always been more of a reality TV gal than a reader, so it raised an eyebrow. When I asked about it, she snapped, saying it was a hobby I should encourage. I let it go, thinking maybe she just needed space. But the shift didn't stop there. Her phone became glued to her hand, always on silent, always flipped face down. Once, when I reached over to grab it for her, she lunged for it like a defensive back. "Just work stuff," she mumbled. It didn't sit right, but I told myself I was imagining things. We had trust. At least I thought we did. One night, I casually asked her how her book club went, trying not to sound suspicious. She stammered something about a new bestseller that sounded made up and quickly changed the subject to a family trip we'd been planning. That was the moment I felt it. That gut punch realization that something wasn't adding up. But I still wasn't ready to face the truth. Money, I just can't believe it. That same night, after Emily went to bed, her phone buzzed. Just one small notification, a harmless ding. Normally, I'd ignore it. But this time, I reached for it. The screen lit up with a message preview. Can't stop thinking about last weekend, and the sender? A name I didn't recognize. Jake Jr. My stomach dropped. Something told me this wasn't just work stuff. The moment I saw the message from Jake Jr., my hands started shaking. I told myself to put the phone down, to walk away. Maybe it was innocent, some harmless work banner, or a joke I wasn't in on. But the nagging pit in my stomach wouldn't let it go. I opened the message. I didn't have to scroll far. The texts were there in plain sight. Playful banner, inside jokes, and unmistakably flirting. Some were vague enough to deny if confronted, but others hit like a freight train. "Last weekend was amazing. I can't wait to see you again. You look stunning in that red dress. Wish you'd worn it longer." The words blurred together as my pulse pounded in my ears. Who was Jake Jr.? And what the hell was he doing sending messages like this to my wife? I needed more answers, but Emily had always been the cautious type. Her messages didn't say much, at least not directly. But then I noticed something. She had deleted most of her older texts. The thread started abruptly, like it had been scrubbed clean. My gut told me that this wasn't just random chatter. There was something bigger, something deliberate happening. I spent the rest of the night in a haze, my mind running in circles. Who was this guy? Where did they meet? Was he married? Did he know about me? I stared at the texts, hoping they'd give me the answers, but they didn't. Emily had covered her tracks well, or so she thought. The next morning, Emily acted like nothing had changed. She kissed me goodbye before heading to work, while I sat there, struggling to keep my expression neutral. Her smile seemed genuine, her laugh easy. But now, every movement, every word felt like a performance. And for the first time in 9 years, I didn't trust her. That day, I couldn't focus on anything. Work meetings blurred into background noise as I scoured social media for clues. I typed Jake Jr. into every platform I could think of, but the results were useless. Just random profiles of strangers. Then I remembered something. Emily had mentioned a new yoga studio she'd joined. She'd been raving about it for weeks, saying how much she loved the young and vibrant atmosphere. That's when it hit me. Was Jake Jr. someone she met there? Maybe one of the trainers, or even another member. My head spun with possibilities, each one worse than the last. Later that afternoon, while Emily was still at work, I made a decision. I grabbed her tablet, the one synced to her phone, and pulled up her email. She wasn't careful with her passwords, and within seconds, I was in. Near the top of her inbox, I found a receipt for 2 first-class plane tickets to Aspen, booked under her name, and Jake Colton Jr. The trip? It was scheduled for next weekend. A self-care retreat. She called it that. I stared at the email, my mind racing. Aspen. First-class tickets. Jake Colton Jr. Who the hell was this guy? And why was Emily planning a trip with him? She told me she was going on a solo yoga retreat. One of those trendy getaways with meditation and smoothies. I'd even helped her pack for the last one a month ago. But now, I was starting to wonder if there had even been a retreat at all. I clicked on the receipt, desperate for more details. The tickets were booked through Jake's account, with Emily listed as the second passenger. The payment had been made using a card I didn't recognize, clearly his. My stomach churned at the thought of another man spending money on my wife. Worse, I noticed the name of the hotel in the confirmation email. A 5-star luxury resort. The type of place we never splurged on because we were saving for the kids' college. I wanted to confront her immediately, but I knew I couldn't afford to let emotions take over. I needed more evidence. Something irrefutable. Something she couldn't worm her way out of with another half-baked excuse. So, I started digging. That night, Emily came home as cheerful as ever. She kissed me on the cheek, made small talk about her day, and even suggested we watch a movie after dinner. The way she carried herself, so calm, so carefree, made my blood boil. I forced a smile and went along with it, pretending everything was fine while my brain churned with the knowledge of her betrayal. She didn't bring up the trip, of course. Instead, she mentioned needing a girls' day, that weekend to prep for her supposed retreat. I nodded and told her that sounded great, all while my mind screamed, "You liar." Later that night, I couldn't help myself. While she was in the shower, I grabbed her phone again. This time, I dug into her calendar. Sure enough, there it was, a blocked-out weekend labeled Aspen Retreat. She'd even added a little yoga emoji, as if to sell the lie to herself. But what really caught my attention was a note attached to the event. It read, "Flight leaves at 6 p.m. Friday. Meet Jake at Terminal C." I clenched my fists, the phone shaking in my hands. She was meeting him at the airport, right under my nose. It wasn't just a fling, it was an entire double life that I sat there, fuming. Something clicked in my head. Jake Colton Jr., the name, felt familiar, though I couldn't place it. Out of curiosity, I searched his name online again. But this time, I added Aspen to the search. And that's when I found him. Jake Colton Jr. wasn't just some random guy. He was the son of Jake Colton Sr., a billionaire real estate tycoon with private jets, vacation homes, and a reputation for throwing extravagant parties. My wife wasn't just cheating on me. She was cheating on me with the heir to a fortune. The pieces started to fall into place. Jake Colton Jr. wasn't just some guy Emily met at yoga. He was a rich, young playboy with enough money to fund her wildest dreams. His Instagram page was a highlight reel of a life I couldn't compete with. Private yachts, expensive cars, ski trips, and parties with celebrities. It made me sick to think that this was who she'd chosen over me. But what was she even doing with someone like him? She wasn't the type to chase money. At least I never thought she was. Had I misjudged her all these years? Or had she been hiding this part of herself the whole time? I spent hours scrolling through his social media, looking for any sign of Emily. And then I found it, a photo posted a few weeks ago. It was a group shot taken at what looked like a high-end lodge in the mountains. Jake was front and center, grinning like he owned the place, which, knowing his family, he probably did. And there, off to the side but unmistakable, was Emily. She was wearing the same red dress I'd bought her for our anniversary, the one she claimed didn't fit anymore. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. It wasn't just a fling or a mistake. She'd been living this double life for weeks, maybe months, pretending everything was fine at home while she played trophy wife to some rich kid. The next day, I couldn't hide my anger. Emily noticed almost immediately. Over breakfast, she asked if I was feeling okay, her voice dripping with false concern. "Just tired," I mumbled, forcing a neutral tone. She nodded, but I saw the way her eyes flicked toward her phone. She'd been more cautious lately, checking it constantly, keeping it close. I knew she was hiding something, but she had no idea I'd already found out. Later that morning, while she was getting ready for work, I decided to make my next move. I called in sick, grabbed my laptop, and started digging even deeper into her secret life. I began by looking up the flight details from the email. Jake had booked them first class on a Friday evening, just as she'd written in her calendar. But then I noticed something odd. The return flight wasn't scheduled until Monday afternoon. She hadn't mentioned needing extra time for this retreat, but it was clear she had planned for a full weekend getaway with Jake. Then I took it a step further. Using the hotel name from the confirmation email, I found their booking page and decided to call. I told the receptionist I was confirming a reservation for my wife, Emily. My hands shook as I gave her name. Yes, we have her reservation, the receptionist confirmed politely. It's a suite booked under Mr. Colton's name. A suite. Of course. Why settle for a room when you can have an entire suite? Before I could hang up, the receptionist added, "Would you like me to confirm the special arrangements for their anniversary dinner?" I froze. Anniversary? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Yes, she replied cheerfully. Mr. Colton mentioned it was a special occasion. We have a private chef and wine pairing planned for Saturday evening. I thanked her, hung up, and sat there in stunned silence. She wasn't just cheating on me. She was celebrating some kind of anniversary with him. And the worst part? I had no idea what kind of milestone they thought they were marking, that I couldn't get those words out of my head. Special arrangements for their anniversary dinner. What anniversary? How long had this been going on? My mind raced with possibilities, each one worse than the last. Was this their first anniversary of meeting? Of starting their affair? It was like finding a puzzle piece that didn't fit, no matter how I tried to force it into place. The idea of Emily sipping wine with this guy, laughing with him while a private chef served them a gourmet meal, was enough to make my blood boil. I wasn't just hurt anymore. I was furious. It was one thing to cheat, but to celebrate it? That felt like a whole new level of betrayal. I decided I needed answers, and I couldn't get them by sitting around. That evening, when Emily went to her yoga class, I drove straight to the studio. I waited outside in my car, watching as women in yoga gear filtered out one by one. But Emily never appeared. My stomach sank. She'd lied again. I decided to follow my next lead, Jake. His Instagram stories were like a real-time tracker for his absurdly lavish lifestyle. When I checked that evening, he'd posted a video of himself in a luxury car, grinning as he held up 2 boarding passes for a flight to Aspen. The caption read, "We can get away with my queen. Black heart." The boarding passes were blurred, but I knew whose name was on the second one. Emily came home late that night, her cheeks flushed and her hair slightly disheveled. She gave me a half-hearted excuse about traffic and fell into bed without a second glance in my direction. I couldn't take it anymore. I had to confront her, but I needed to do it smart on my terms. The next morning, I acted like everything was normal. I made breakfast for the kids, joked around like nothing was wrong, and even kissed Emily goodbye as she left for work. Inside, though, I was already putting my plan into motion. I reached out to a friend of mine, Sam, who worked in IT and owed me a favor. Sam wasn't just good with computers. He was a magician when it came to digging up information. I sent him everything I had on Jake, his social media, the flight details, even the hotel reservation. "Find me something," I told him. "Anything." By late afternoon, Sam called me back. His voice was tense. "Dude, I don't know how to say this, but you're not going to believe what I found." "What is it?" I asked, gripping my phone so hard my knuckles turned white. "That anniversary dinner? It's not what you think." Some post. Jake just posted something to his private Facebook group. He's been bragging about getting engaged this weekend. My heart stopped. Emily wasn't just cheating on me. She was planning to get engaged to him. Engaged? My wife was about to get engaged to another man. The words ricocheted in my brain like a bullet. How was that even possible? We were still married, for crying out loud. What kind of twisted fantasy was she living in? My anger was white-hot, but underneath it was something worse. Humiliation. Was I that disposable? That irrelevant? I wanted to call her right then and there, scream into the phone, demand an explanation. But the smarter part of me, barely holding on, knew that wouldn't get me anywhere. Emily was a skilled liar, and she'd twist my outburst into me being unreasonable or controlling. No, I needed to confront her with all the facts at once. Leave no room for her slippery excuses. That evening, I started piecing together a timeline. I went back through old texts, emails, and even our shared photos, trying to pinpoint when she might have started seeing Jake. The red flags were all there, glaringly obvious in hindsight. The weekend yoga retreats, the the sudden interest in self-improvement, the designer clothes that seemed far out of our usual budget. And now I knew why. She'd been dressing up for him, not for me. But there was one detail I couldn't shake: the engagement. Jake was planning to propose, but Emily hadn't mentioned a word about leaving me. Did she think she could just run off with him like some romantic movie ending? Or worse, was she planning to string us both along, keeping her options open? I couldn't sit on this anymore. I needed to know what she was thinking. The next morning, I acted as if nothing was wrong. I told Emily I was going to take the kids to my mom's for the weekend, giving her a perfect cover to leave for Aspen without suspicion. She was almost too eager, kissing me goodbye and saying she'd miss us so much. If I hadn't already known the truth, her performance might have fooled me. By the time she left for work, I had everything set. I called Sam again and asked him to help me track Jake's location once they arrived in Aspen. If this proposal was happening, I wanted to be there, not to stop it, but to watch her lies collapse under their own weight. That night, as I was packing for the kids' trip, something caught my eye: Emily's overnight bag. She'd left it by the closet, partially open. I knew it was wrong, but curiosity got the better of me. I unzipped it, half expecting to find lingerie or some other proof of her betrayal. Instead, I found something worse. Tucked in the side pocket was an envelope filled with cash, thousands of dollars, and a one-way train ticket back from Aspen. My wife wasn't just cheating. She was planning to disappear entirely. The envelope of cash and the one-way train ticket felt heavier in my hands than they should have. It was the final, undeniable proof that Emily had been preparing for something bigger than just a fling. She wasn't just cheating. She was planning to leave me, our marriage, our family, our life together, all behind. The realization hit me like a sledgehammer. This trip to Aspen wasn't just a getaway. It was her escape. I sat down on the bed, the bag still open beside me. My heart raced as I tried to make sense of it all. How long had she been planning this? And how did she think she'd pull it off? Was she going to vanish without a word? Or was she planning to send me some generic text after she was already gone? I rummaged through the bag for more clues, half hoping I was wrong. Among the clothes and toiletries, I found her passport tucked into a small makeup pouch. Why would she need a passport for a domestic flight? And then it clicked. This wasn't just about Aspen. Jake must have been planning to take her somewhere else, somewhere far away. My stomach churned at the thought. I spent the rest of the night oscillating between rage and heartbreak. Part of me wanted to throw the bag in her face the moment she walked through the door. Another part of me wanted to pack it myself and tell her not to come back. But then there was the pragmatic side of me, the one that had been quietly working in the background, gathering evidence and piecing together the puzzle. That side knew I needed to see this through to the end. The next morning, Emily was her usual cheerful self, chatting about her day as if nothing was amiss. I played along, though every smile felt like a lie. She told me she'd be checking into the retreat by Friday evening and would be back refreshed and recentered on Monday. I nodded, my face a mask of indifference. Inside, I was boiling. After she left for work, I called Sam. It's worse than I thought. I told him, explaining the cash, the ticket, the passport. She's not just cheating. She's running away with this guy. Sam was quiet for a moment before replying. If she's leaving, you need to move fast. Do you want to confront her before she goes? Or let her dig her own grave? Neither, I said, the plan forming in my head. I'm going to let her think she's getting away with it. But when she gets to Aspen, I'll be there waiting. That afternoon, Sam called with a critical update. I managed to access Jake's private flight records, he said. He's booked a private jet leaving Aspen on Sunday night. Destination, the Cayman Islands. I nearly dropped the phone. The Cayman Islands? Why there? Sam hesitated. That's the part that's going to piss you off the most. Jake's dad owns a villa there. And get this, it's registered under a trust in Emily's name. I froze. A trust? For her? Emily wasn't just planning to leave me. She was setting herself up for a life of luxury, and Jake was funding the whole thing. The idea of Emily living it up in a Cayman Islands villa while I stayed behind to pick up the pieces of our shattered life lit a fire inside me. She wasn't just betraying me. She was rewriting her future, one that didn't include me or our kids. And Jake? He was financing her escape like some twisted knight in shining armor. It was the kind of betrayal I wouldn't have believed if I hadn't seen it myself. But now I had an advantage. I knew their plan, and if Emily thought she could waltz off into the sunset without consequences, she was in for a rude awakening. The next 2 days were a blur. I dropped the kids off with my mom, telling her it was just a weekend trip to sort some things out. She didn't press, but her concerned look told me she knew something was wrong. I didn't want to drag anyone else into this mess, not yet. Meanwhile, Sam and I worked like detectives. He helped me gather everything I needed to confront Emily and Jake in Aspen. The texts, the receipts, even screenshots of the trust registered in her name. Every piece of evidence was another nail in the coffin of their lies. And then, to take it one step further, I decided to document everything. I bought a small hidden camera that fit neatly into the lining of my jacket. If Emily and Jake thought they could gaslight their way out of this, I was going to make sure the truth couldn't be denied. Friday rolled around, and Emily was in full retreat mode. She kissed me goodbye, her fake smile as convincing as ever, and walked out the door with her bag. I watched her drive away, knowing I'd be seeing her again far sooner than she expected. An hour later, I was on my own flight to Aspen. I landed late that evening, checked into a modest hotel, and spent the night preparing. Sam sent me updates as Jake's private plane landed, and Emily checked into the resort under his name. From the outside, it probably looked like a romantic getaway. Inside, I hoped it was beginning to feel like a trap. Saturday morning, I scoped out the resort where they were staying. It was the kind of place you see on magazine covers. Sprawling grounds, towering evergreens, and opulence oozing from every corner. I'd never felt more out of place in my life, but I wasn't there to fit in. I was there to watch everything fall apart. Around noon, I spotted them. Emily and Jake were walking hand in hand near the lobby, laughing like they didn't have a care in the world. She wore a dress I'd never seen before, probably something he'd bought her, and he had that smug, rich boy grin plastered across his face. As I watched from a distance, something caught my eye. Jake was holding a small box. A jewelry box. It hit me all at once. This wasn't just some romantic getaway. He was going to propose to her that day. Seeing Jake with that jewelry box sent my pulse into overdrive. I stood frozen for a moment, watching as he and Emily strolled toward one of the resort's private gardens. She was glowing, her face lit up with a joy I hadn't seen in years, not since before the cracks in our marriage began. It made me sick to think that the same woman I'd built a life with was now reveling in the attention of a billionaire's son, completely oblivious to the storm brewing right behind her. I followed at a safe distance, careful not to let them see me. They stopped near a picturesque fountain, the kind of spot that looked straight out of a rom-com proposal scene. Jake leaned in close, whispering something that made Emily laugh and touch his arm. My stomach churned. This was it, the moment he was about to make his grand gesture. But I wasn't going to let him finish without ruining it. I circled around, positioning myself behind a cluster of tall hedges just a few feet from the fountain. From there, I had a clear view of the whole scene. Jake was fidgeting with the jewelry box, clearly trying to find the right words to make his proposal perfect. Emily stood there, beaming, her entire demeanor screaming anticipation. I slipped my hidden camera into position, ensuring it captured the scene. If I was going to confront them, I wanted every second recorded. I wasn't just exposing their lies for myself. I was making sure there was no way they could twist the narrative later. Finally, Jake dropped to one knee. The absurdity of the moment almost made me laugh. My wife, who was still legally married to me, standing there about to accept a proposal from another man like she was in some fairy tale. Emily, Jake began, his voice loud enough for me to hear clearly. You've changed my life in ways I never imagined. I've never felt like this before. With anyone. You're my world, and I don't want to spend another day without you by my side. I rolled my eyes so hard it hurt. If I hadn't been so furious, I might have admired how much effort he was putting into this charade. I know it's fast, he continued, opening the box to reveal a massive diamond ring. But when you know, you know. Emily, will you marry me? Before Emily could even open her mouth to respond, I stepped out from behind the hedges, clapping slowly. Well, isn't this just adorable? I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. Emily spun around, her face draining of color as she locked eyes with me. Jake, still on one knee, looked up in confusion, clearly unsure of who I was. "Go on," I said, gesturing toward the ring. "Don't let me interrupt. I can't wait to hear what she says." The moment Emily saw me, her face twisted in panic. Her wide eyes darted between me and Jake, like she was calculating how to get out of this without it blowing up. But there was no escape this time. She was caught, and I was going to make sure there was no smooth talking her way out of it. "Michael," she stammered, taking a shaky step toward me. "What are you doing here?" "What am I doing here?" I repeated, my voice rising with every word. "That's rich, Emily. The real question is, what are you doing here? And with him?" I jabbed a finger toward Jake, who had stood up and was watching the exchange with a mix of confusion and irritation. Jake frowned. "Wait, who is this?" he asked, looking at Emily. Her lips parted, but no words came out. She was like a deer caught in headlights. "I'm her husband," I said, turning my glare to Jake. "Surprise." Jake blinked, the reality of the situation finally sinking in. His expression darkened as he whipped back to Emily. "You're married?" "Jake, I can explain," Emily pleaded, her voice shrill and desperate. "Oh, this should be good," I said, crossing my arms. "Go ahead, Emily. Explain to Jake how you've been lying to him, just as much as you've been lying to me. Let's hear it." She started to cry, which was her go-to move when cornered. "Michael, it's not what it looks like. I was going to tell you." "Tell me what?" I interrupted, my anger boiling over. "That you're running off to the Cayman Islands with this guy? That you've been sneaking around behind my back for months? That you're celebrating some kind of twisted anniversary with him?" Jake's eyes narrowed at that. "Wait a second," he said, his tone colder now. "What anniversary?" Emily froze, her tears drying up instantly. "Jake, it's not, it's just," she trailed off, visibly floundering. "Yeah, Emily," I said, seizing the moment. "Why don't you tell him about the special dinner you two have planned? Or should I show him the receipts?" Her face turned ghostly pale, and Jake took a step back from her, his jaw tightening. "You told me you were done with your marriage," he said, his voice low and venomous. "You said you were moving on, and now I find out you've been lying to both of us?" I couldn't help but smirk. "Looks like your queen has been playing us both," I said, my words aimed at Jake. "Welcome to the club." Emily spun toward me, anger flashing across her face now. "You don't understand. This wouldn't have happened if you had just paid attention to me. You were always too busy, too distracted. Don't you dare blame this on me." I cut in, my voice sharp as a blade. "I've been working my butt off to give you and the kids a good life. And this is how you repay me? By sneaking off with some rich kid who throws money at you." Jake suddenly laughed, a bitter, humorless sound. "Oh, don't act like you're some victim here," he said, glaring at Emily. "You think I didn't notice you were only interested in my wallet? You're nothing but a gold digger." Emily's mouth fell open in shock. "Jake, that's not true." "Save it," Jake snapped, cutting her off. "You can forget the engagement, the Cayman Islands, all of it. You're not getting a damn cent from me." With that, he stormed off, leaving Emily standing there, trembling. And for the first time in weeks, I smiled. She had lost everything in a matter of minutes, and I was about to make sure she felt every ounce of the betrayal she'd dealt me. As Jake disappeared into the resort, Emily stood frozen, her eyes darting between the fountain, the path he'd taken, and me. Her chest heaved as she tried to process what had just happened. For the first time in months, I saw genuine fear in her expression. Not regret, not sorrow, fear. She wasn't worried about me or our marriage. She was panicking because her shiny new life had just gone up in flames. "Michael," she started, her voice shaky. "Please, can we talk about this?" I laughed, a short, bitter sound. "Now you want to talk? After everything you've done?" Tears welled up in her eyes again, but this time they didn't faze me. I was done falling for her theatrics. "It wasn't supposed to happen like this," she said, her voice cracking. "I didn't mean to hurt you." I tilted my head, feigning curiosity. "Oh, really? So the secret plane tickets, the hidden trust fund, the engagement ring, those were all just misunderstandings, huh?" She stepped toward me, reaching out as if to touch my arm. I pulled back, making her flinch. "Michael, I was lost. I felt so alone." "Save it," I snapped. "You didn't feel alone. You felt entitled. You wanted the money, the trips, the life he could give you. Be honest for once, Emily. Her lips quivered as she tried to come up with some kind of defense, but there was none. I didn't mean for it to go this far, she whispered. Yeah? Well, it did. And now you got nothing. Jake's gone, and so am I said, my voice cold and final. Her face twisted in desperation. Michael, please. Think about the kids. We can fix this. We can go home and figure it out together. The mention of the kids hit a nerve. My jaw clenched as I took a step closer to her. The kids? I hissed. You mean the ones you were about to abandon? The ones who had no idea their mom was planning to run off to the Cayman Islands with some billionaire's son? Her mouth opened, but no words came out. She knew I was right. Don't you dare try to play the family card now. I continued, my voice rising. You weren't thinking about them when you lied to my face. You weren't thinking about them when you packed that bag and bought a one-way ticket out of their lives. Emily crumpled onto the edge of the fountain, burying her face in her hands. Her sobs echoed in the quiet garden, but I felt nothing. No sympathy, no pity, just the cold satisfaction of watching her facade crumble. As I turned to leave, ready to end this nightmare, I caught sight of something glinting in the bushes. Curious, I stepped closer and pushed the branches aside. It was Jake's engagement ring, the one he must have tossed in his anger. I picked it up, turning the diamond over in my hand. It was massive, easily worth more than my car. Emily lifted her head, her tear-streaked face lighting up with hope when she saw me holding the ring. Michael, she began. But I shook my head. You wanted this life so badly? Fine, keep it. With a flick of my wrist, I threw the ring into the fountain. The splash was small, but the symbolism wasn't lost on either of us. Her screams followed me as I walked away. Emily's cries echoed behind me as I walked away from the fountain, my fists clenched and my heart pounding. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. Whatever part of me had once cared enough to fix things, to hear her out, had died the moment I uncovered her plan to leave me and the kids. Now, all I wanted was to reclaim the pieces of my life that she hadn't completely destroyed. I made my way back to my car, ignoring the curious stares of a few resort guests. My phone buzzed in my pocket, and for a moment, I considered ignoring it. But when I saw Sam's name on the screen, I knew I had to pick up. Tell me you've got good news, I said as I answered. Some hesitated. That depends on how you define good. I dug a little deeper into that trust fund Jake set up for Emily. Turns out it's more than just a villa in the Caymans. There's cash in there too. A lot of it, like 7 figures. I stopped walking, the weight of his words sinking in. You're telling me she was about to walk away with millions? Yep, Sam confirmed. But here's the kicker. Since Jake was the one who set it up, he still has control over the account. If he pulls the plug, she gets nothing. A grim smile tugged at my lips. Well, considering how things ended between them, I'd say that money's as good as gone. Sam chuckled. Probably. But just in case, I've locked down the joint accounts you share with Emily. She won't be able to touch a dime without your approval. You're a lifesaver, Sam, I said, the first genuine relief I'd felt in days washing over me. When I got back to my hotel, I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the wall as the events of the day replayed in my mind. The confrontation, the lies, the ring. It all felt surreal, like something out of a bad movie. But it was real, and now I had to decide what came next. Emily's betrayal had burned everything to the ground, but I wasn't going to let it define me. I wasn't the one who had cheated, lied, and plotted to run away. I still had my kids, my integrity, and a chance to rebuild my life without her. The next morning, I packed my things and checked out of the hotel. My flight home wasn't until the afternoon, so I decided to grab breakfast at a small cafe in town. As I sipped my coffee, I noticed a commotion near the entrance. Emily walked in, her face pale and drawn, her eyes darting around until they landed on me. She looked like she hadn't slept. Her hair was a mess, and her clothes were rumpled. Nothing like the polished, put-together version of her I'd seen with Jake. Michael, she said, approaching my table. I sighed, setting down my coffee. What do you want, Emily? We need to talk, she said, her voice trembling. Please, just give me 5 minutes. I gestured to the chair across from me. Fine, 5 minutes. Emily sat down, wringing her hands nervously. Jake froze the trust, she blurted out. I have nothing. I raised an eyebrow, pretending to be surprised. Shocking. Her lip quivered, but she pushed on. I know I've made mistakes. Huge ones, but I don't want to lose everything. I don't want to lose you. I leaned forward, narrowing my eyes. Lose me? Emily, you already did. The second you packed that bag and booked that one-way ticket, you made your choice. She opened her mouth to protest, but I held up a hand to stop her. This isn't about saving us. This is about you trying to save yourself. Her silence told me I was right. Emily sat across from me, her face contorted with desperation. I'd seen her cry before, but this was different. This wasn't guilt or remorse. This was someone scrambling to salvage what was left of a crumbling empire. And I wasn't about to let her manipulate me into cleaning up her mess. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, she said, her voice trembling. But I was stupid, Michael. I got caught up in something I didn't understand. Jake promised me things, and I thought it would fix everything. I snorted. Fix everything? By abandoning your family? By lying to my face every single day? You don't even hear yourself, do you? She flinched, her hands clutching the edge of the table, like it was the only thing keeping her upright. I didn't mean to hurt you or the kids. I swear I thought. You thought what, Emily? I snapped, my voice low but sharp. That you could waltz off to the Caymans with your billionaire boyfriend. Leave me with the fallout. And what? Call it a clean break? Start over? Her tears fell freely now, but I didn't care. I'd spent too many nights lying awake, wondering what I'd done wrong, questioning myself while she plotted this whole double life. Now, she wanted to backtrack, but I wasn't giving her that luxury. I was wrong, she whispered. I was selfish, and I thought I needed something different. But Jake, he wasn't what I thought he was. I raised an eyebrow, leaning back in my chair. Let me guess. You found out the rich playboy didn't care about you as much as his money. Shocking. She winced, nodding slightly. He froze the trust. He said he wanted someone who loved him for more than just what he could give them. I swear, Michael, I wasn't using him. I got lost. I didn't know how to ask for what I needed from you. I shook my head, laughing bitterly. So it's my fault now? You're unbelievable, Emily. You had a problem, but instead of talking to me, you lied, you cheated, and you tried to disappear. That's not getting lost. That's being a coward. Her sobbing grew louder, and a few other patrons glanced over from their tables. I didn't care. Let them look. Let them see the woman who tried to burn her life to the ground for a pile of cash and a diamond ring. Michael, please, she said, her voice breaking. I know I can't undo what I've done, but I don't want to lose you. I don't want to lose the kids. I'm begging you, just give me a chance to make it right. I stared at her for a long moment, my emotions swirling in a chaotic storm. Anger, hurt, betrayal, they all fought for dominance. But then I realized something. I wasn't angry anymore. I was done. She could cry and plead all she wanted, but the person sitting across from me wasn't the Emily I had loved. She was a stranger now, someone I couldn't trust, no matter how much she begged. I leaned forward, keeping my voice calm but firm. You don't want to lose the kids? I asked. She nodded eagerly, her tears momentarily pausing. Good, I said, because you're not going to get them. I've already spoken to my lawyer. I'm filing for full custody. Her face crumpled, her sobs turning into gasps. Michael, no, please. You can't. I can, and I will, I said, standing up. You didn't just betray me, Emily. You betrayed them. And I'll be damned if I let you drag them into the mess you created. I left the cafe without looking back, her cries fading into the background as I walked away. Walking out of that cafe felt like shedding 1,000 pounds. Emily's cries echoed in my ears, but I didn't falter. For the first time in months, I felt like I was in control again, not just of my life, but of my future and the future of my kids. She could beg, cry, and throw every excuse in the book at me, but it wouldn't change what she'd done or the decision I'd made. Back at the hotel, I called my lawyer, Mr. Callahan. He was a no-nonsense type who had already been briefed on the situation. I want to move forward with the custody filing, I told him. You're sure about this? He asked. Custody battles can get ugly. Are you prepared for that? I've never been more sure, I said. She's unstable, and she was ready to abandon them. I have evidence, too. Emails, receipts, the works. She doesn't stand a chance. Good, Callahan said. We'll get the ball rolling. With what you've got, it'll be hard for her to argue her way out of this. By the time I flew home, I was a man on a mission. The first thing I did was meet with my mom, who had been watching the kids. Seeing their faces, innocent, oblivious to the storm raging behind the scenes, only strengthened my resolve. They deserved better than what Emily had tried to do. How was the trip? My mom asked cautiously. It was eye-opening, I said, avoiding her gaze. I'll explain everything soon, but for now, I need to focus on the kids. Things are going to change. She nodded, sensing there was more to the story, but respecting my silence. Over the next few days, I began piecing my life back together. I froze our joint accounts and redirected all bills to a new account under my name. I told the kids that their mom was taking some time to herself while I figured out how to break the truth to them. It wasn't fair, but I couldn't shatter their world just yet. Emily tried reaching out, of course. Texts, calls, even a late-night voicemail where she begged me to meet her and talk things through. I ignored all of it. She'd made her bed, and now she could lie in it. Then, on Wednesday morning, I got a knock on the door that I opened it to find Emily standing there, looking disheveled and desperate. But she wasn't alone. Standing beside her was a man in a suit I didn't recognize. "Michael," she said, her voice trembling. "This is Mr. Langston. He's my attorney." I leaned against the door frame, my jaw tightening. "What do you want, Emily?" She swallowed hard, gripping the strap of her purse. "I'm filing for joint custody." I stared at her, the audacity of her words hitting me like a slap. "You think you're going to waltz back into their lives after everything you've done? Think again." Langston cleared his throat. "Mr. Anderson, my client is prepared to prove she's still a fit mother. I suggest we find a way to handle this amicably." I clenched my fists, staring Emily down. She had no idea what was coming. "You want to fight?" I said. "You got one, but you're not going to win." Emily and her lawyer, Mr. Langston, stood on my doorstep like a bad dream come to life. The nerve she had to show up here, acting as if she hadn't just tried to abandon her family, was mind-boggling. But if she thought I was going to let her waltz back into my kids' lives after what she'd done, she had another thing coming. "I suggest we handle this amicably," Langston repeated, his tone dripping with faux professionalism. I crossed my arms and looked directly at Emily. "You want joint custody? After you packed a one-way ticket to the Caymans and tried to run off with another man?" I laughed bitterly. "Good luck convincing a judge you're fit." Emily's eyes filled with tears, but I wasn't falling for it this time. "Michael, please," she whispered. "I know I made mistakes, but I love our kids. They need me." I scoffed. "Funny. You didn't seem too concerned about them when you were planning your new life. Did you even bother to think about how this would affect them?" Langston stepped in, his voice sharp. "Mr. Anderson, this isn't the place for personal attacks. My client is prepared to demonstrate her commitment to her children." I leaned in slightly, narrowing my eyes. "Let me make one thing clear. I've been documenting everything. I have proof of her infidelity, her attempt to disappear, and the trust fund her billionaire boyfriend set up for her. You really want to drag this into court? Be my guest." Langston blinked, clearly caught off guard by my confidence. Emily, on the other hand, looked like she wanted to shrink into the ground. They left shortly after that, but the fire in me was burning hotter than ever. I called my lawyer, Callahan, and filled him in on the confrontation. "She's trying to push for joint custody," I said. Callahan chuckled dryly. "Let her try. With the evidence you've got, she'll be lucky if she gets supervised visitation." Hearing that gave me some relief, but I knew the fight was far from over. Emily wasn't the kind of person to back down easily, especially when her pride was on the line. Over the next few weeks, the custody battle began in earnest. Emily's legal team painted her as a devoted mother who had made a temporary lapse in judgment. They argued that her affair had no bearing on her ability to parent and that she deserved a second chance. But Callahan and I came prepared. We presented emails, texts, and receipts showing her intentions to leave, the one-way ticket, and even the frozen trust fund Jake had set up for her. We highlighted her lies, her recklessness, and most importantly, Her complete disregard for how her actions would impact our kids, the final hearing. Emily tried one last Hail Mary. She took the stand, tears streaming down her face as she talked about how much she loved the kids and how she'd do anything to be part of their lives again. But Callahan had saved his trump card for last. He handed the judge a copy of Emily's flight itinerary, showing the one-way ticket and the fake yoga retreat. "Mrs. Anderson," the judge said, his voice stern, "you claim to love your children, but your actions suggest otherwise. You plan to abandon them. That's not the behavior of a devoted mother." When the judge issued his ruling, it was swift and final. I was granted full custody. Emily was given supervised visitation, an outcome that left her in tears and me finally feeling like justice had been served. As I left the courthouse, I felt a strange mix of relief and sadness. This wasn't how I'd imagined our story ending, but it was the closure I needed to move forward. Emily had lost everything, and while the road ahead wouldn't be easy, one thing was clear. The kids and I were going to be okay.